Welcome to True Crime Case Files, where we dive deep into the most shocking and perplexing crimes. Today, we uncover the story that rocked the foundations of America's religious community, a tale of faith, betrayal, and murder at one of the nation's largest mega-churches. Grace Valley Church in Phoenix, Arizona, was more than just a place of worship. With its sleek modern architecture, state-of-the-art facilities, and a congregation of over 15,000 faithful followers, it represented the new face of American Christianity. At its helm stood Michael Thompson, a charismatic pastor whose powerful sermons and contemporary approach to faith attracted both celebrities and ordinary believers alike. By his side was his wife, Sarah Thompson, a former social media influencer whose beauty and charm helped bring a younger generation to the church. Together, they portrayed the perfect image of modern Christian leadership: successful, influential, and deeply devoted to their faith and community. But beneath the polished surface of worship services and charitable works lay a web of dark secrets, financial corruption, and forbidden desires. Sarah Thompson's decision to expose the truth would ultimately lead to a fatal confrontation that would leave one person dead and shake the foundations of this religious empire. On March 12, 2023, what began as a typical Sunday service at Grace Valley Church would end in bloodshed, forever changing the lives of thousands of faithful followers. This is the story of how a mega-church's carefully constructed facade crumbled, revealing a truth more shocking than anyone could have imagined. Join us as we unravel the events that led to this tragic end, examining the complex web of relationships, power, and betrayal that turned a house of worship into a crime scene. This is True Crime Case Files, and this is the story of the Grace Valley Church scandal. Michael Thompson was the embodiment of the American religious success story. Born in 1971 to a modest family in rural Arkansas, he grew up watching his father preach in a small Baptist church that barely seated 50 people. By 2023, he had transformed himself into one of the most influential religious figures in the Southwest, leading a mega-church empire worth over $50 million. In his tailored Italian suits and designer watches, the 52-year-old pastor cut an imposing figure on stage. His perfectly styled silver hair and bright, camera-ready smile made him look more like a Hollywood actor than a traditional preacher. Every Sunday, he would stand before his congregation of 15,000, his voice resonating through Grace Valley Church's state-of-the-art sound system as he delivered messages of prosperity and divine favor. Michael had this way about him, recalls David Martinez, a former church elder. When he spoke, you didn't just hear him, you felt him. He could make you believe anything was possible through faith, and people loved that about him. The path to his success began in 2010, when Thompson arrived in Phoenix with nothing but a dream and a small group of devoted followers. Within just 3 years, his congregation had grown from 50 members meeting in a rented school gymnasium to over 3,000 gathering in their first permanent building. By 2023, Grace Valley Church occupied a sprawling 40-acre campus in North Phoenix, complete with a coffee shop, bookstore, and even a recording studio. Thompson's rise to prominence was meteoric. His books on modern faith living became bestsellers, with titles like God's Prosperity Plan and Divine Success Principles earning him spots on national television. His podcast, Living in Grace, attracted millions of downloads monthly. He was a frequent guest on religious networks and even made appearances on mainstream talk shows. Pastor Mike, as he preferred to be called, lived in a $4.2 million mansion in Paradise Valley, drove a fleet of luxury cars, and traveled by private jet. He justified his lavish lifestyle as proof of God's blessings and evidence that his teachings about prosperity through faith were true. In 2020, Thompson's public image reached new heights when he married Sarah Chun, a 25-year-old social media influencer with a massive following among young Christians. Sarah, with her perfect Instagram aesthetic and modern approach to faith, seemed to complete Thompson's brand of contemporary Christianity. They were like Christian royalty, says former church member Rachel Williams. Michael and Sarah represented everything the modern believer aspired to be: successful, attractive, influential, and supposedly deeply spiritual. The couple lived in what appeared to be perfect harmony, sharing glimpses of their luxurious life on social media. Sarah would post videos of their morning devotionals in their pristine white kitchen, while Michael showcased their charitable works and church events. Their marriage was held up as a model of Christian partnership, with Thompson often preaching about how God had divinely orchestrated their union. But behind the carefully curated social media posts and public appearances, cracks were beginning to form in the foundation of Thompson's religious empire. The same ambition that had driven his meteoric rise would ultimately contribute to his dramatic fall. Looking back now, says Martinez, his voice heavy with regret, we should have seen the signs, the constant need for more money, more influence, more control. It was never enough for Michael, and that's usually when people start cutting corners. The perfect image that Michael and Sarah Thompson presented to the world was about to unravel, revealing a truth that would shock their followers and lead to one of the most scandalous episodes in modern religious history. Sarah Chin Thompson was far from the traditional pastor's wife. At 28, the former Instagram influencer had amassed over 2 million followers with her blend of fashion, lifestyle, and modern Christian content. Her perfectly curated feed showed a life that many young believers dreamed of: designer clothes, luxury vacations, and a seemingly deep spiritual connection with her megachurch pastor husband. Sarah was different from the moment she arrived, recalls Emma Martinez, a former church staff member. She didn't fit the mold of a typical pastor's wife. She was young, beautiful, and incredibly savvy about social media. Some of the older church members were scandalized when she posted poolside photos in a bikini, but the younger crowd loved her authenticity. Sarah's journey to becoming Mrs. Thompson began in 2019 when she attended a Christian influencer conference where Michael was the keynote speaker. Within 6 months, they were married in a lavish ceremony that reportedly cost over $300,000. The wedding was featured in several Christian lifestyle magazines and trended on social media with the hashtag #BlessedBride. Looking back, everything happened so fast, says Lisa Chun, Sarah's older sister. One minute she was doing sponsored posts for Christian clothing brands. The next she was married to one of the most powerful pastors in the country. We were all caught up in the whirlwind. At first, Sarah seemed to thrive in her role as the modern face of Grace Valley Church. She launched the church's youth ministry program, Grace Next Gen, which quickly attracted hundreds of young members. Her Instagram stories showing behind-the-scenes glimpses of church life and her marriage to Michael gained millions of views. But by late 2022, observant followers noticed subtle changes in Sarah's online presence. Her usually frequent posts became sporadic. The candid moments with Michael disappeared, replaced by carefully staged photo ops. Her signature bright smile seemed strained in photos, and her eyes told a different story from the cheerful captions below. She stopped coming to the women's ministry meetings, remembers Rachel Williams. When we did see her, she was always on her phone, documenting everything. At the time, we thought she was just being a dutiful pastor's wife, recording church events. We had no idea she was gathering evidence. What the public didn't know was that Sarah had started keeping a detailed digital diary of life inside Grace Valley Church. Using a separate phone and a secret email account, she documented conversations, photographed documents, and recorded meetings. She had discovered something that would shatter the church's carefully constructed image. I remember the exact moment everything changed, says James Norton, the church's former IT administrator. Sarah came to my office one day, asking about access to the church's financial servers. She said Pastor Thompson had requested it for their home computer. Something about her expression made me uneasy. She looked scared. That fear was well-founded. Behind the scenes, Sarah had stumbled upon information that would expose the dark underbelly of Grace Valley Church. But before she could reveal what she had discovered, she needed to ensure her own safety. In January 2023, she secretly created an OnlyFans account under a pseudonym, not to post explicit content, but to establish a financial safety net and a platform beyond the church's control. The OnlyFans account was genius, really, explains Catherine Reynolds, Sarah's attorney. It allowed her to build a following and financial resources without the church's knowledge. She posted fashion content and lifestyle videos, nothing scandalous. But it gave her an independent platform that Michael couldn't touch. Little did Sarah know that her careful documentation and secret preparations would soon become crucial evidence in a criminal investigation. The perfect pastor's wife was about to bring down one of the largest megachurches in America, but the price of truth would be paid in blood. On the surface, Grace Valley Church was a model of modern Christian success. The church's annual report for 2022 showed revenues of over $50 million, with Pastor Thompson proudly announcing plans for a new $20 million youth center. Every Sunday, the parking lot would fill with luxury cars as thousands gathered to hear his messages of prosperity and divine favor. But beneath this polished exterior lay a web of financial manipulation, emotional abuse, and moral corruption that would soon shock the Christian community. The money was always flowing, reveals Marcus Weber, former church accountant, his voice trembling as he speaks. But where it was flowing to, that was the question that got me fired. When I started noticing irregular transfers to offshore accounts, I brought it up to the board. 2 days later, I was dismissed for lack of faith in leadership. Sarah's secret documentation would later reveal a complex scheme of financial mismanagement. Church funds were being funneled through a maze of shell companies, allegedly for ministry expansion, but actually funding the leadership's lavish lifestyle. The new youth center, promoted as a beacon of hope for young Christians, was in reality a carefully crafted real estate scheme. They showed us beautiful architectural renderings, says former youth pastor Kevin Martinez. But the same designs had been shown at 3 different locations over 2 years. Each time, they collected special offerings for the divine vision. Each time, the money disappeared into what they called preparatory phases. But the financial impropriety was just the tip of the iceberg. Sarah's hidden recordings captured disturbing leadership meetings where Michael Thompson exercised cult-like control over his inner circle. Staff members were required to install tracking apps on their phones for pastoral accountability. Young female volunteers were specifically assigned to work closely with certain wealthy male donors, with clear implications of expected behavior. There was this unspoken system, reveals Jennifer Adams, a former church administrator, her hands nervously fidgeting with her coffee cup. Beautiful young women from the congregation would be promoted to special ministry positions. They would receive gifts, designer bags, expensive jewelry. Then suddenly, they would disappear, usually with a large donation to the church's discretionary fund, following shortly after. By February 2023, Sarah had accumulated over 100 gigabytes of incriminating evidence. Audio recordings revealed Michael Thompson coaching board members on how to pressure elderly congregants into changing their wills to benefit the church. Security footage showed late-night meetings with questionable business partners, entering through the church's private entrance. One particularly disturbing video, dated January 15, 2023, captured Michael in his church office, berating a young staff member who had questioned the church's financial practices. "God has placed me in authority over you." His voice booms in the recording. "Questioning me is questioning God himself. Do you want to risk divine judgment?" The pressure to maintain this facade was immense. Church employees were required to sign non-disclosure agreements that bound them not just to silence, but to spiritual loyalty. Those who spoke out found themselves not only unemployed but essentially excommunicated, labeled as agents of division during Sunday services. The control was total, explains Dr. Eleanor Richards, a cult specialist consulted during the subsequent investigation. Financial, emotional, spiritual. Thompson had created a system where questioning him meant questioning your entire faith, your community, your eternal salvation. It was a perfect trap. But perhaps the most shocking discovery came from Sarah's examination of the church's real estate dealings. The documentation revealed that Grace Valley had been operating as a sophisticated money laundering operation, using its status as a religious institution to clean millions in questionable funds through property transactions. The church would buy properties at inflated prices, explains FBI financial crimes investigator Robert Martinez. These properties would then be renovated for ministry use, with massive contracts going to companies that, we would later discover, were controlled by church board members. The paper trail Sarah provided was crucial to our investigation. As Sarah compiled her evidence, she noticed increased surveillance of her activities. Church security guards began following her movements on campus. Her phone would show signs of tampering. Strange cars would park outside their mansion at night. The noose was tightening, and she knew time was running out. She called me in early March. Lisa Chun recalls, her voice breaking. She said if anything happened to her, there was a USB drive hidden in a hollow cross on her mother's grave. The truth has to come out, she told me. No matter what happens to me. Sarah Thompson was about to expose one of the largest religious scandals in recent American history. But as she prepared to release her findings, she had no idea that her quest for truth would end in a confrontation that would leave one person dead and change countless lives forever. March 12, 2023, began like any other Sunday at Grace Valley Church. The morning sun cast long shadows across the massive parking lot as early service volunteers arrived at 6 a.m. Security cameras captured Sarah Thompson arriving unusually early, entering through a side door at 6:15 a.m., carrying a large designer handbag that would later become crucial evidence. She looked different that morning, remembers Maria Gonzalez, the church's cleaning supervisor. Usually, she'd greet us with a smile, but that day, her face was serious. She went straight to Michael's office and locked the door behind her. What the security footage would later reveal was Sarah systematically downloading files from the church's main computer system. In her designer bag was a laptop containing all the evidence she had gathered over the past year: financial records, inappropriate emails, photos of questionable meetings, and recordings of threatening conversations. At 8:45 a.m., Michael Thompson arrived for the first service. Security footage shows him entering the building with his usual confident stride, unaware that his empire was about to crumble. He was wearing a tailored blue suit, his trademark American flag pin on his lapel. Pastor Mike seemed normal during the first service, recalls Deacon James Wilson. He preached about divine loyalty and staying faithful in times of testing. Looking back now, it's chilling how those words would take on a different meaning just hours later. The 9 a.m. service proceeded as usual, with Thompson delivering an impassioned sermon about loyalty and betrayal, drawing parallels to Judas's betrayal of Jesus. Sarah sat in her usual front row seat, her expression unreadable as she recorded the entire service on her phone. At 11:30 a.m., between services, everything changed. Church security cameras captured Sarah entering the media room, where she connected her laptop to the church's sophisticated audiovisual system. What happened next would shock the entire congregation. "I was in the sound booth when she came in," says former tech operator Chris Martinez, his hands shaking as he recalls the events. "She inserted a USB drive and said, 'I'm sorry, but people need to know the truth.'" Before anyone could react, every screen in the church started playing her video. The video began with financial documents showing millions in misappropriated funds. Then came the audio recordings of Thompson threatening staff members, security footage of late-night meetings with suspicious characters, emails discussing payoffs to silence former members. The evidence was devastating and comprehensive. Michael Thompson was in his office when the screens came to life. Security footage shows him running through the hallway, his face contorted with rage. He burst into the media room at 11:42 a.m., just as the video was showing proof of his offshore accounts. "I heard the shouting from down the hall," remembers Church Secretary Linda Morrison. Michael was screaming about betrayal and damnation. Then there was a loud crash and everything went quiet. Too quiet. What happened in the next 7 minutes would become the subject of intense police investigation. The security cameras in the media room had been disabled, but audio recordings from adjacent rooms captured fragments of an intense confrontation. At 11:49 a.m., a single gunshot echoed through the church halls. Sarah Thompson's voice can be heard on the emergency call that followed. "Please hurry. There's been a shooting at Grace Valley Church. Oh God, there's so much blood." When police arrived at 11:53 a.m., they found Michael Thompson's body on the media room floor, a single gunshot wound to his chest. The gun registered to him was found nearby. Sarah Thompson was sitting in the corner, her designer clothes stained with blood, quietly repeating, "He gave me no choice." The scene was chaotic. recalls Detective James Rodriguez, lead investigator on the case. We had thousands of church members outside, media arriving by the minute, and a potential crime scene that was also one of the largest churches in the state. But most striking was Mrs. Thompson's demeanor. She was completely calm, almost in a state of shock. The investigation would later reveal that in those final moments, Michael Thompson had attempted to destroy the evidence and silence his wife permanently. The struggle that ensued would end with him being shot with his own weapon, a tragic end to a ministry built on deception. In his final sermon, Michael preached about betrayal, reflects former church elder David Martinez. He had no idea that his own betrayal of his congregation's trust would be exposed just hours later, or that it would cost him his life. The investigation into Michael Thompson's death would reveal a web of corruption far more extensive than anyone had imagined. As Phoenix Police Department's Homicide Division processed the crime scene at Grace Valley Church, federal agents were already moving to secure the church's financial records. This wasn't just a homicide investigation, explains FBI Special Agent Karen Matthews. What we uncovered was one of the most sophisticated religious fraud operations we'd ever seen. The shooting was just the tip of the iceberg. The evidence Sarah Thompson had gathered proved invaluable to investigators. Her meticulous documentation included over 300 hours of audio recordings, 1,200 pages of financial documents, surveillance footage from hidden cameras, emails detailing hush money payments, photographs of secret meetings with known criminals. Mrs. Thompson's digital diary was extraordinary, says digital forensics expert Dr. Timothy Chun. She had created an encrypted database cataloging years of criminal activity. Every entry was dated, cross-referenced, and backed up in multiple secure locations. She knew exactly what she was doing. The autopsy report, released on March 20, 2023, revealed that Michael Thompson had cocaine in his system at the time of his death. This discovery led investigators to a series of offshore accounts linked to drug cartels. The church wasn't just laundering money, reveals DEA agent Robert Martinez. Thompson had built a complex network using religious mission trips as cover for international drug trafficking. The private jet wasn't just for spreading the gospel. Sarah Thompson was initially charged with first-degree murder, but the case took a dramatic turn when her attorneys presented evidence of long-term abuse and manipulation. Security footage from the church showed Michael Thompson's increasingly erratic behavior in the weeks leading up to his death. There's a particularly disturbing video from March 1st, describes Detective Rodriguez. Thompson can be seen threatening Sarah with a gun, saying God will understand if I have to eliminate obstacles to his work. The level of psychological torture she endured was staggering. The trial began on September 15, 2023, drawing national media attention. The Phoenix courthouse became a circus of reporters, former church members, and religious activists. Sarah Thompson, dressed in modest black attire, presented a stark contrast to her former social media persona. The prosecution tried to paint her as a calculating killer, says legal analyst Maria Hernandez. But as evidence of Thompson's crimes emerged, public sympathy shifted dramatically. This wasn't just about self-defense anymore. It was about exposing a criminal enterprise that had exploited religious faith for personal gain. Key testimony came from former church employee Jennifer Martinez. I watched Michael change over the years. The more power he gained, the more paranoid he became. He started keeping guns in every office. He had us install panic rooms. He was convinced someone would expose him eventually. The financial investigation revealed that Grace Valley Church had laundered over $100 million through various schemes, fake missionary programs in South America, inflated construction contracts for church expansions, fraudulent real estate investments, shell companies disguised as Christian ministries, cryptocurrency operations hidden in church accounts. On November 30, 2023, after 7 weeks of testimony, the jury reached their verdict. Sarah Thompson was acquitted of murder charges based on self-defense. However, the story didn't end there. The Grace Valley case led to a complete overhaul of how we monitor religious organizations, explains IRS investigator Mark Wilson. 47 people were ultimately indicted, including church board members, accountants, and even local politicians. Sarah Thompson's testimony helped federal authorities recover over $60 million in stolen funds. The money was returned to the defrauded congregation members, many of whom had invested their life savings in Thompson's fake investment schemes. The hardest part wasn't the physical evidence. Sarah would later tell investigators, "It was realizing that every Sunday, I watched him use God to steal from people who truly believed. Some of them gave up their retirement, their children's college funds, everything because they trusted him." Grace Valley Church's massive building now stands empty, a monument to betrayed trust and corrupted faith. The parking lot where luxury cars once congregated is overgrown with weeds. The state-of-the-art audiovisual system that broadcast Thompson's sermons to thousands now collects dust. The tragedy isn't just what happened to Michael, reflects former church elder David Martinez. It's the thousands of people whose faith was shattered. How do you trust again after something like this? How do you believe? Today, Sarah Thompson lives a quiet life far from the spotlight that once defined her existence. Her Instagram account, once filled with perfectly curated images of prosperity gospel living, now sits dormant. Her last post, dated December 25, 2023, was a simple message: "Truth comes at a price, but lies cost even more." Sarah rarely speaks about what happened, says her sister Lisa Chun, sitting in her modest Seattle apartment. But she's working with abuse survivors from religious organizations. She's found a way to turn her trauma into something meaningful. The ripple effects of the Grace Valley scandal continue to impact the American religious landscape. The FBI's subsequent investigation, Operation Holy Money, has led to investigations of 17 other megachurches across the country. What happened at Grace Valley wasn't unique, explains religious studies professor Dr. Amanda Richards. It was just the first time someone on the inside had documented everything so meticulously. Sarah Thompson's evidence provided a blueprint for investigating religious financial fraud. The former church building was sold in early 2024 for $12 million, a fraction of its assessed value. The proceeds went to a victim restitution fund, helping former congregation members who had lost their life savings to Thompson's schemes. "We're still finding victims," says FBI victim coordinator James Wilson. "People who remortgaged their homes for the Divine Investment Program, elderly members who changed their wills, college funds emptied for missionary ventures. The financial damage alone exceeds $200 million. Many former Grace Valley staff members have struggled to rebuild their lives. Some, like former youth pastor Kevin Martinez, have left religious work entirely. How do you go back to ministry after something like this? The doubt, the guilt, it changes you. I still believe in God, but I don't trust religious institutions anymore." Wendy Thompson, Michael's first wife whom he divorced to marry Sarah, finally broke her silence in a recent interview. "I tried to warn people years ago about Michael's manipulation, his greed. Nobody wanted to listen. In religious communities, charisma often trumps character, and Michael had charisma in spades." The church's former accountant, Marcus Weber, now works with a nonprofit organization that helps religious institutions implement financial accountability measures. The lesson from Grace Valley isn't that all churches are corrupt. It's that without transparency and accountability, power corrupts even in sacred spaces. Sarah Thompson's trial and acquittal sparked a national conversation about abuse of power in religious institutions. Several states have since passed legislation requiring greater financial oversight of religious organizations, dubbed the Grace Valley Laws. "The tragedy at Grace Valley forced us to confront uncomfortable truths," says religious reform advocate Rachel Martinez. "About power, about faith, about the fine line between devotion and manipulation. These conversations are painful but necessary." The investigation also led to significant changes in how banks monitor religious organizations' financial activities. The Thompson Protocols, as they're now known in banking circles, have helped prevent an estimated $500 million in religious fraud schemes since their implementation. As for the congregation members, their stories reflect the complex legacy of Grace Valley Church. Some have found new spiritual homes, Others have abandoned organized religion entirely. Many still gather in small support groups, trying to make sense of how their faith was weaponized against them. The hardest part to accept, says former church elder David Martinez, his voice heavy with emotion, isn't the money we lost. It's the realization that while we thought we were serving God, we were really just feeding one man's empire of lies. Sarah Thompson's personal diaries, released as part of the court proceedings, end with a reflection that perhaps best captures the lessons of the Grace Valley tragedy. Faith shouldn't require blind trust. True believers shouldn't fear questions. And God's work doesn't need to be hidden in offshore accounts. The light of truth may be painful, but it's the only path to healing. The Grace Valley Church scandal stands as a stark reminder that the greatest threats to faith often come not from outside critics, but from those who claim to be its greatest defenders. It's a story of how the search for truth, though costly, remains our best defense against corruption, even perhaps especially in our most sacred spaces.